Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready to dive into some campaign strategy.
Puppies.
Today, we're dissecting Kamala Harris's recent media blitz. You know, that whirlwind of appearances she just did.
Right, trying to win over voters.
Exactly. And we're using this piece by Eleanor Clift from the Daily Beast. It's called Kamala Harris's Media Blitz Was Clever, but Did It Move the Needle?
Catchy title.
Definitely grabs your attention. So that's what we're here to figure out. Did it work? Let's break it down.
One of the first things that Cliff points out is this really interesting contrast between how Harris and Trump are approaching the media.
Oh yeah, night and day.
Right. Harris is out there, she's engaging, she's doing interviews. Trump, on the other hand...
He's like a ghost, dodging interviews left and right.
Yeah, and not just any interview. She mentions him like completely bailing on that 60-minute sit-down.
And demanding an apology on top of it.
Yeah.
For something that happened ages ago, it seems like.
It's almost like he's trying to dictate the terms of engagement, which, knowing Trump's history with the media...
Not surprising.
Totally tracks. Remember when he refused to do that second debate with Harris? Probably because he felt like he couldn't control the situation.
So he'd rather just not play.
It seems that way, but that just gives Harris more of an open field to make her case, you know? Visibility in a presidential race is huge.
For sure, sometimes just showing up is half the battle.
Exactly. But the question then becomes, did she make those appearances count?
All right, well, let's rewind a bit then and follow Harris on this media marathon because it was a whirlwind 24 hours. 3 back-to-back interviews. First up, The View.
Smart choice. Daytime TV, big audience, lots of women watching.
Reaching out to those key demographics.
Exactly, and then boom, she switches gears completely.
Howard Stern. Talk about a 180.
Right, you've got that male demographic, a totally different energy, gotta be on your toes with them. Shows she can handle anything.
And to wrap it all up, Stephen Colbert. Late night, a bit of humor, a different vibe. Love Colbert.
It's playing the relatable candidate card, right?
Right.
Late night shows, they're more relaxed, you get to see a bit more of their personality.
Like you could be having a beer with them.
Exactly, well, minus the actual beer.
And the presidency.
Yeah, for now.
But speaking of relatable, we've got to talk about those Doritos.
Mmm.
And that little stumble on The View.
Ah, the Doritos, right. It's funny how these little details can become part of the story.
It's true. Makes you think, hey, she stresses about elections and eats Doritos just like me.
Exactly. Humanizes the candidates a bit.
Definitely. But before we get completely sidetracked by snack food, let's circle back to that The View interview for a sec.
Oh yeah, there were some interesting moments there.
Clift mentioned this kind of awkward moment where they asked Harris about doing things differently from Biden, and she just hesitated.
It did seem like a bit of a missed opportunity, like she didn't have a really strong answer ready to go.
And, you know, the Trump campaign jumped all over that.
Oh, absolutely. Turned it into an attack ad before the interview even ended, I bet.
Probably. So maybe not the home run they were hoping for on The View.
Yeah, sometimes those live interviews can be tricky.
No kidding. But then she goes on Howard Stern, and it's all Doritos after the election. Daily workouts on the elliptical.
Even had a favorite Formula One driver. Lewis Hamilton, I think it was.
Right. Trying to connect with the people. Do you think that stuff actually works? Like, do voters care?
I think it makes a difference. It just sort of breaks down that barrier a little, you know, shows they're not just robots programmed to win elections.
Although I do wonder what a robot program to win an election would be like.
That's a question for another day.
True, true. But, hey, I appreciate her keeping it real. Though I gotta say, between talking about Doritos and dictators, she actually managed to squeeze some real policy talk in there.
Right. So we got some substance, too. That Medicare proposal is interesting.
Yeah, expanding it to cover long-term in-home care, if I remember correctly.
That's it. And she's really tapping into this whole sandwich generation thing, you know? People taking care of their kids and their aging parents at the same time. It's a lot.
No kidding. But is that proposal enough to sway voters, do you think?
It's hard to say. It depends on how much they prioritize that issue, I guess. And of course, the question always becomes, how are you going to pay for it?
Right, because that's the catch, isn't it? And she talked about using potential savings from Medicare's new drug negotiation power.
Which, again, is a whole other can of worms. Whether that will actually generate enough savings, whether it'll even get through Congress.
Yeah, it's complicated.
To say the least. But it'll be interesting to see how much attention this proposal gets as we get closer to November.
Speaking of things that get attention, nobody could have predicted that Bob Woodward would drop a bombshell right in the middle of all this.
Talk about perfect timing. Right there during the Colbert interview, news breaks about his book alleging that Trump was still having phone calls with Putin even after leaving office.
Wild. And then on top of that, the whole thing about him sending COVID tests to Russia when we were facing shortages here.
It was a lot to process, and Harris definitely didn't shy away from using it to her advantage.
Oh, she went there.
For sure. She kept bringing it back to Trump's admiration for dictators, and even hinted that Putin might have some kind of leverage over him.
That's playing hardball.
It is, and it raises some serious questions about judgment and who we can trust on the world stage.
Because this election isn't just about different policies, it's about character too.
Absolutely. But with all this high-stakes drama unfolding, somehow the biggest media controversy ended up being an edit.
You've got to be kidding me. Seriously, an edit. Out of everything. That's what people are getting hung up on.
It's the oldest trick in the book, right? Distraction. Instead of actually engaging with what Harris is saying, they're zeroing in on this tiny little edit that CBS made.
So for those of us who somehow missed this whole editing saga, it's all about Harris's comments on Israel during that 60 Minutes interview, right?
Cliff actually includes both versions of the quote in her article.
And the first one is a bit of a doozy. Something like, and I'm quoting here, "The work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region by Israel that were very much prompted by, or a result of, many things, including our advocacy for what needs to happen in the region." Phew, catch all that.
I think I need a diagram.
Right. Now, the edited version that CBS aired is a lot shorter. It's, "We are not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end."
Much more to the point.
Yeah. So, I mean, were they really that different?
Not really. They both convey pretty much the same message. Just goes to show you how something so insignificant can get blown out of proportion and create this whole thing.
It's kind of ridiculous when you think about it. But anyway, distractions aside, did this media blitz actually work? Did Harris achieve what she set out to do?
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Did it move the needle, like Cliff said? I think in some ways, yes.
How?
Well, she was inescapable for those 24 hours. Constantly on TV, all over social media. She effectively countered Trump's attempts to control the narrative just by showing up.
And doing the interviews. He could learn a thing or two.
Right. But then the question becomes, did she do enough to differentiate herself, to really solidify her own vision for the future? And that's where I'm not so sure.
Clift seemed to think she could have been a bit bolder in those moments, really seize the opportunity.
I agree. We're heading into the final weeks of this election, and she needs to be crystal clear about what she stands for, what she'll do differently.
Because let's be real, elections are often decided on more than just policy.
Oh, absolutely. It's about personality, it's about trust, and sometimes it's just about who we perceive as the lesser of two evils.
Which is kind of depressing when you think about it.
Yeah, it's not exactly inspiring.
But it's the reality we're facing. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Harris's media blitz, what are we left with? What does it all mean? I don't know about you, but it just makes me even more curious to see how the rest of this election plays out.
Me too. But one thing's for sure, in this 24/7 news cycle, social media frenzy world we live in, the way a candidate uses the media, for better or worse, can make or break their campaign.
No kidding. So much to think about. Thanks for breaking it all down with me.
Always a pleasure. Until next time.